All right, should we get going? Should I wait? I don't want to cut off the chit chat. She says to go. All right. My name's Andrew Hogan. I head up insights at Figma, which means I talk about industry trends and things that are happening, present at conferences like this. I do research, all kinds of things like that. Today I'm going to talk to you about reading with my daughter and something that I learned through one of the books that she and I read together. And you might be thinking, well, you're probably going to talk about like Go Dog Go or something else like that. I'm actually going to talk about 1,000 Design Classics, this book. That is, if you don't know it, is 1,000 things that are mostly industrial design. And they're sort of like timeless classics of design through a long time. And I originally suggested this to her because I was tired of reading Go Dog Go or other sorts of children's books, and I wanted to kind of change it up. And then it turns out my daughter, who's 2.5, really likes reading this book. And she actually asked me, hey, can we read the design book? And then she asked me to turn on the Roomba at the same time. I don't know why those things are connected to her, but the Roomba runs and we read the design book. And I tell her about things in it. This is from this year, this person designed this thing, here's what they were trying to accomplish. I don't know if she actually cares, but I think she sees that it makes me really happy. And, I appreciate that. So here's me showing a couple chairs, and you can see a lamp, and then also it's like a honey scooper thing. I don't even know what that's called, honey utensil. And then here's me showing a couple more chairs, and there's like a radio, I think, up there also. And I noticed that she kept asking me, what's that? And I kept pointing to different chairs in the book. Here's a chair from 1929. It's leather and metal. Here's one from 1935. It's got like a rattan kind of thing, and it's wood. And here's one from 2002 that's plastic. And the book is filled with chairs. And because I'm a huge design nerd, I also had a question, which is what's industrial design's trajectory? And where has it gone? And where might it go? And so this is looking at Google data about, the use of the word industrial design within a corpus of language, in this case English. And you can see a huge expansion in the post-war era. So that rise there. And then you can see kind of a decline as the economy sort of slows at some points. But then as the economy ramps back up, industrial design becomes more popular. And then there's sort of the 70s, which there was economic issues in the US. And then it sort of increases throughout the 80s and the 90s. And then something happens there at the end. And I don't know if you can see it, but we're at like one of the lowest points in the last 80 years of use of the term industrial design within this corpus of language. And there's some other data that kind of gave me some pause when I was thinking about industrial design's trajectory. And that's that in 2008, the US BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, said that there would be a 9% increase in the number of industrial designers over the next 10 years. And instead, there was a 27% decrease in the number of industrial designers over that period of time. Something happened in there. And the US BLS said that there would be this increase because there would be an increase in consumer and business demand for new and upgraded products. They thought there'd be more demand for design because there'd be new and upgraded products. That's a pretty reasonable assumption. And it turns out there was an increase in demand for new and upgraded products. They were just different kinds of products. So looking here at some key dates, 1983, the internet, but we all know that it sort of started spreading much more rapidly later on. There was the iPhone in 2007, and you can see really the term user experience taking off as industrial design kind of declined and dipped. And I thought to myself, because I'm a design nerd, instead of just reading with my daughter, I had to think about this. With AI, are we in that same moment for digital design? Right now, there's 118,000 people employed doing digital design in the US. And What will it be in 10 years? Will we be down 27%? Will we be up? And I want to look at that question through 3 lenses. The lenses are jobs, scale, and AI itself and what we know about it. So the first one is jobs. I mentioned that there are 118,000 people working in digital design, but I only know that because the US BLS added this to their official jobs sort of directory, occupational employment and wage statistics. They added this web and digital interface designers category. Previously, this had been tracked with developers, kind of mashed together, and there had been distinct jobs for graphic design, architecture, interior design, fashion design, and then obviously industrial design. And so this is a new job. I don't know if everybody in here knew this, but you now have a real job. That's kind of cool. And the question, of course, is what other countries will start tracking this kind of thing moving forward, or will it remain sort of mashed together with development in other countries? And the projections for this job have looked pretty good. Right now, the BLS says it'll be up 18%. In Australia, there's a jobs sort of projection that it'll be up 31%. So that's kind of exciting. And we all know what happened between 2019 and 2022. Demand increased really dramatically. More and more leaders care about design and feel that there's something about design that'll be important for the success of their business. There's a running faucet of opportunities at every level. In my 25 years, I've never seen anything like this before. This is from a design leadership, recruiter, placement, talent person, Judy Wirt. If you don't know her, she's a great person to know. But we all know what happened after that. So this is from Indeed. UX design jobs are down pretty significantly relative to the peak. Indeed indexed this to 2018, and you can see the UK and Ireland are at 50% of 2018. Other countries are at significantly below the number of jobs posted in 2018. And then obviously there's this huge sort of belly in the middle where, well, there was a ton of hiring, there was a ton of interest, the market was really hot. UX research jobs goes through sort of a similar kind of trajectory. Maybe not quite as dramatic, honestly. And of course, the main driver of this is tech unemployment claims. So this is from Glassdoor. You can see the tech unemployment spike that exceeds by orders of magnitude more the spike in the Great Recession. So this is how much unemployment occurred at that time. So what's going to happen to jobs now? Where is this all going to go? Well, when you look at the jobs, it's a very different story outside of tech. Industries like utilities, like financial services, like the government have been hiring like crazy. If you look at the gap between these two lines, this is actually what it seemed to be increasing versus what it was revised to actually increase. So these industries are growing even faster than initially thought based on the initial data that came in. Tech is going in the other direction. Information, which includes tech and media, going in a very different way. I think that digital transformation, as it continues to roll on, I don't know if we're all tired of hearing this term, will probably keep many designers very busy. You can see this in articles like software is now as important as hardware in cars, which was an entire special report that the Economist did about the automotive industry, and I think we can replace automotive with all kinds of transportation things. You can see job postings from Johnson & Johnson for med tech product design managers. Here's the NHS with an inclusive design lead, which obviously could encompass many things outside of digital. There's just whole industries that are still going through this process that really is very different than where the tech industry is today. They're almost at opposite directions. We see this in our own data when we ran a survey about design hiring. Some of the teams had increased dramatically over just a few years. Retail, 75 to 250 people. A manufacturing company quintupled the number of designers that it had. A healthcare company went from 60 to 200. A financial services company doubled in size. And there are many examples like this. And I would say, let's hope this continues, and all evidence indicates that it will, that design will remain in demand in these other industries. The second conversation I want to address here is scale. You just can't quintuple the size of your design team and not expect anything to change. You have to think about, what are you going to do with all of those people? How are you going to support them? How are you going to make them successful? And to do that, you have new roles and expansions of roles, like the Chief Design Officer is now in 5% of Fortune 100 companies, according to the DXC 100, which is from the Design Executive Council, and their analysis of the top design executives. You can see Chief Design Officers in Electrolux, the City of Helsinki, Chase, Starbucks, Capital One, BBC, Scottish Government. There are many more of these. But 5% is a pretty small number. So there's clearly some room to go. When you look at the biggest banks, that number is at 50%. They have a top design executive who's a CDO or design SVP. But in retail, it's only 10%. So it's clearly very different between industries. One of those design executives, Karin Hansen at Chase, described the process of going from 300 to 800 and then to more than 1,000 in just a few years. And then she said it still wasn't even enough to maintain in ratios to deal with all the hiring that they were doing across the rest of the business. Digital had just changed so many things about what they were doing. Software was so much more integral. They needed more design help. And of course, then there are new roles. So design systems, content leads, design ops, accessibility. I know what you're thinking. These aren't actually new roles, except that now sometimes they're VPs. Sometimes they're whole jobs, whereas they were someone's sort of sideshow before. Can you imagine 10 years ago a design systems VP? That just wouldn't have existed. And so because of all the scale that's happening, because of how important this is, these are now relatively common roles in organizations. But of course, it's not even enough, because if you hire a bunch of designers very quickly, it might not even be that effective. You need PMs who understand, you need design ops, you need consultancies and agencies to come in and help, you need developers who understand, you need executives who understand. This sort of scale question isn't just solved by throwing designers at the problem. We've found in our studies that adding these people brings issues of collaboration inside and outside design into the fore. That's a major problem. Career progression becomes a bigger issue. How do you keep 1,000 people moving forward, or 100 or 250, however many more you have? And then how do you understand impact? People start asking questions about what's going on when you have a team of 250 or 1,000 people. And then, of course, there's the question of who does what and what are the roles when there is more sort of literacy and understanding and who's participating and who's responsible for what. We've actually found in some of our studies that the relationship between a designer and a product manager is as predictive of how they feel about their job as their relationship with their manager or with the rest of the design team. It just points to the challenges here that come with adding lots of new skills who are really important to the business. Dan McCoskey told me that my first role as Chief Design Officer almost broke me. I had to change how I evaluated impact, to look at people and thinking about how the environment and helping them do the best work was actually more impactful than what I specifically designed myself. And so this point about a more design-friendly environment becomes even more important when scale is at question. This point, people versus scale, is actually going to get a lot more complex because we have new capabilities and new things coming. And that's what I want to talk about last here, about artificial intelligence. I think nearly every talk today has referenced AI in some way, so it's only fitting that mine does too. We've all seen some version of this data point. So submissions for our Config conference in 2023 were 3 times more likely to include the term AI and reference AI than in 2021. Increases of 1,700% for searches for an AI design tool, which at Figma we are very aware people are looking for this. And then it's already part of the process for 65% of people who took the UX tools survey which is a sort of separate industry survey that's run. This is already happening today. That's because it speeds up some design work. We've heard example after example at this conference. Janelle Estes described writing research plans and saying that generative AI is a total time saver, giving a starting point, getting her 70 or 80% of the way here. This is a person who was the Chief Insights Officer of User Testing, which is a software platform that many of you have probably heard of, and is now a lecturer at Bentley University. She's having her students write research plans and then compare that to how ChatGPT would write those research plans and learn from the differences. Earlier, Luke Wroblewski mentioned how it can, if you can model a behavior, you can teach a machine to repeat the same pattern. But look at all the cleanup that he also had to do and all the process that had to happen there. There's a lot of different steps involved. And then what about the way we all work together? It's great to talk about, how it can generate new things and new visuals, but most of design is actually trying to communicate with people about what they want, what they're trying to do, whether this solves the issue that they're having, and what about all of that? It's something we're thinking a lot about at Figma. So we've released various features in FigJam AI, and we noticed that more engineers were running retros because they could generate a template. And we know that when teams run retros with each other and take the time to reflect on their work, they're much more successful as teams. So this, to us, this was a great sign. And then there's what we call multiplayer AI, which is how we collaborate together with AI and do that all in one big group. So we've released the Jambot, which is a plugin that I think is pretty cool. And it's a different take on the sort of conversational interface that sort of spreads out throughout a canvas. And our research team has described that you're never alone anymore if you don't want to be. So you can actually interact with other people who are using Jambot together next to each other, and you can see what other people are prompting, what other people are saying. But then that also raises some issues, because what if I prompt it in just the stupidest way you can possibly imagine? I'm basically revealing something that's like I'm not getting inside my brain. And what if you start using Jambot while I'm talking? Do I feel happy about that? Do I feel sort of insulted that you're not fully engaging with the content? So this multiplayer AI is something that we all have to figure out together, even though it can feel pretty magical when you start using it together. Janelle describes how she feels like she has a safety net because she knows what good is. So she generates a research plan and she knows that this is 70, 80% of the way there. But what about students that she's teaching? What are they missing? What do they not know that they're missing? And she describes that as something that's incredibly frightening for her, but something that she also feels is almost unavoidable. That's why she's having students do it and think about it and learn from it. Something that we talk about at Figma is how fast these things are now getting in the world and the AI feature fatigue that many users now feel. One of our, Gus, one of our researchers, has described what he's seen as the industry building the first 70% incredibly fast, and that's a huge focus. But then they're not really ready for users. You put them in front of users and they don't quite work. They don't quite do the thing that those users are trying to accomplish. Companies are focusing more on enabling tech than on the product experience. I think the key here is something that John Maeda said. When we create with AI, we have to understand that the AI is not the boss. The humans are the boss. And if we don't understand that and think about that and keep that in mind, then we're the victims. AI is obviously changing design work. You can see certifications and courses and cohorts and all kinds of things, and many of us are thinking about how to upskill and how to do all of this. Designing AI has become a job, whereas before it was companies like Adobe had someone focused on designing AI, someone like Meta, somebody like Google, and now the New York Times and Walmart are hiring designers to work on AI tools because they're seeing a need for improvement. I think the big thing I would think about here is that we always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years, and we underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. How many things do we do now that we could not have imagined 10 years ago? And what are the things that we'll think about moving forward that will feel in that same way? So those 3 conversations give us a way of thinking about this. But in putting this talk together, I think one of these conversations really drives all the other ones, and I'm sure you can guess what that is. What's the impact of design on AI and of AI on design? This is the biggest question, the biggest conversation that we all face. And we've, of course, seen something similar in that original data point that I shared. This expected increase of industrial designers of 9%, which then morphed into a decrease of 27%. But I'd ask you, would you really say that there's less design energy and momentum and effort now than there was at that time? Personas, journey maps, experience maps, prototyping, iteration, design thinking, all of these are terms that are embedded throughout business today. Maybe they're misused, maybe they're a little bit misunderstood, but they're throughout business. And there's twice as many digital designers today as there were industrial designers at the peak, and graphic design has grown as well. So would you actually say that there's less design energy and momentum? Or has that design energy and momentum just flowed into something different and designing something new? And will it happen again? So if we had this flip from thinking about industrial design to thinking about user experience as sort of a more holistic concept, will we think about AI design? Will we sort of refactor this and just think about user experience but with AI as an embedded tool? And I think the reason I'm putting it this way is because we've seen over and over again that when we have things that we design and use and appreciate, we tend to design and use and appreciate those things more. It's sort of a loop. When the iPhone first came out, it was not fantastic. Apps were not great. And then over time, those things were used and improved and made better, and there was more and more investment in making these things better. If we're using AI all the time, it will improve. People will put design energy into it and will make it better. Will there be future roles and skills expected? Will we have to provide value in different ways with different mental models and think about how to talk about this in new ways? Sure. Meta designer, chief ontology officer, coherence generator, drifting clear, pattern, I don't know. We're in a liminal space right now where what was no longer is, clearly, but what comes is not yet. We don't know where things will go, what direction things will go in. We just know that they will change. But we always know that. But I do know that there will still be chairs, there will still be apps, there will still be sites, and I think the question is, what else will there be? What else will be in this book? The next version of it. I'm sure there'll be another version. There's always another 1,000 design classics. Will there be new devices that we carry around with us or have in our ears or on our eyes? Will there be different kinds of chairs that have cutouts in them? Will we put things on our faces and goggles that we wear everywhere? Will we all just do that now in the way that we carry AirPods with us in our ears? Will we have different cars or lamps or whatever else? Because it seems clear that there will be an increase in consumer and business demand for new and upgraded products, just like the BLS predicted. They might just be different products and different experiences. And I think it's going to be pretty interesting. And I hope all of you work on those things and help make it more interesting. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. Hopefully you all know the drill by now. We're going to alternate between live audience questions and questions from the chat. We're actually going to start with one from the chat this time. So in a rapidly developing space like AI, what are some sustainable undercurrents that designers can track to make their designs future-proof? For example, a lot of companies are talking about AI-based UIs and operating systems. What are some things designers can do to make their designs and products more transferable to those eventualities? so that they are not playing catch up when that future materializes.
So do I need to repeat the question?
No, it's in the mic.
You're good?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I mean, we all watched, well, many of us watched Luke's talk this morning, which is an amazing example of taking out from something that we know works, you know, a chat-based interface, and then building additional context and additional sort of flexibility in there. And I think that's a fantastic example and something that we've seen from him time and time again, where you take the thing that exists now and you start adding and experimenting and putting different things on it. And then you sort of learn from that. I don't think there's really such a thing as future-proofing so much as a set of skills that you can continuously try to use, patterns, things that you can repeat. I would say the one area where it seems pretty clear is that we will still need screens to display information and options and choices and other things like that. And I think the belief that there will be no more screens, it'll be all like audio, like that's just not going to work, and we've sort of been through that before. So that's the one area I would say seems relatively safe.
Any questions from the audience?
They all want lunch.
Yeah.
So I had a conversation yesterday. I'm still kind of like working through how to even formulate this as a question. But basically, like the premise of this is like as we introduce AI into different types of systems, will UI interfaces shrink because we'll have less of a need to have like fine-tuned control over what we're doing because we'll have like a powerful tool to command and do. So kind of just like any reactions or thoughts to that idea and general trends of maybe like spacing and the display of features in the future of AI?
I don't know. And I think that that's what's interesting about this is that it seems clear you could make more dynamic interfaces in the future, which would then mean you would have to, you could sort of shrink them. And you could offer more personalized options. We watched Scott and the rest of the Blink teams talk earlier. And so you could make recommendations that then make it so you don't have to show the whole menu of options. That seems likely. But I just don't really know. And I think what I would do is start experimenting with your own GPTs. I've had multiple conversations actually with the guy next to you about how you could experiment your way through this and sort of see what's possible. And the biggest thing I would think about is just how to play and try and reflect on what works and what doesn't work. That's my non-answer answer. Lunch. No.
I was wondering, we talk a lot about risks, where this can go in sort of a negative direction. Just wondering from your perspective, some of this research, the job research, how optimistic are you in that view? Is it you have an optimistic, take on this? That, design survives and we all have roles and, I mean, you kind of alluded to it, like maybe those roles change, but I'm just wondering, like, people talk about P-doom too, right? Like, what's your P-doom? Could this go off the rails?
I do have an optimistic view of it, and I partially have an optimistic view on it, and seeing how it sort of has developed over time, in the sort of continuous march of things that are generally easier, better to use, and how important design has been to making that happen. I think it's funny because like as more people have gotten more tools to be more creative, like more easily, those people have made more new and interesting things. And I think the kind of design that many of us do, which is also very creative, benefits from some of those same areas. Obviously there are ways of misusing these tools or things that can sort of just go awry in general. But that also has been true of many other sorts of technologies, So yeah, I do have a pretty optimistic view, but I feel pretty good about that based on sort of the track record of this stuff. And then obviously for those of us who think about like design history, you know, this has been something that people have been afraid of for like 50 plus years. Like, are we making the world better or worse? Are we making things easier, harder to use? And I think in general, things have gotten better, easier to use, more enjoyable, even though there's some room for improvement. I wish people could vote on these answers. You know, like that answer was BS. I hated that answer. And then like this answer was really good. Like I want a real time. Anyway, maybe you can tell me later.
So I'm going to out myself a little bit here and say that I was an industrial designer, and as the adage says, I sold my soul to tech. And I'm curious because I've been thinking a lot about how there's a sense of steadiness, of slowness, of intentional practice when it comes to industrial design. Obviously, there's some more hand making, but there's of course innovation in machinery and technology in that space as well. But when we think about the history of industrial design, we think about paper sketches, we think about making jigs and working on these things. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about if you feel that we have what we may have gained or lost with the sense of speed that now we have so much more access to things, and how do we bring that intentionality back and slow down to make strategic decisions that maybe we didn't have a choice when it came to making a chair and the glue had to dry and you had to make, you know, all of the jigs and use a miter saw that may not be working. But now when some of those limitations are removed and speed is a driving factor, maybe the gains and losses of that and how that affects the design process.
So I was not an industrial designer, so I feel slightly unqualified, but I will share some thoughts from my perspective as like a researcher, industry analyst. I think there's an inflexibility that also comes with that, and that's sort of the downside. Like it can only be this shape that was manufactured, the materials can only do this thing. And now you work in tools that can shift and change and be, you know, they don't have to be a chair, they could also be a table. It's really hard to make a chair table that actually works. And so I think you have this flexibility that's really useful. And you can also do that quickly. You know, if we roll a change out that doesn't work, well, we roll it back. We just stop. And we, you know, I think that's a flexibility that's a huge advantage. There's a question about intentionality. And I think one of the interesting things that I've observed, this is super anecdotal, I have no data about this, is the number of people who have mentioned the word craft to me must have increased like 500% in the last 6 months. And then there's of course the other side of like, well, craft sounds sort of like bullshit. And like, what does that even mean in a digital sort of context interaction? Like that's a physical word, but I think that's a little bit of a choice. You can have craft in any number of places where people use something, appreciate it or don't appreciate it. And so I do think there is a reaction to this idea that we should just ship things as fast as possible and ship and ship and ship and ship and ship, where there's a craft and an intentionality that can come through shipping potentially, or through shipping, you know, iterations and prototypes and other things like that. The last thing I would say is that it's very difficult to think about building a relationship with an individual through a physical object, but it is much easier to do that through a digital medium. And that then gives you the ability that things can change and become more useful over time. And most businesses are actually incentivized to do that, where they will become more useful. The problem is that they misfire and they add these features that are not actually that helpful, but the potential exists. And that is something that's very difficult to do with industrial design, where the object is sort of the object. That would be my non-industrial designer answer and thoughts on that, and I don't know if that resonates. If you could vote on that, and then
at 65%.
I'll take that.
with you until the end.
It's fair enough. I'll take that. There are two more back there. I don't know what time we're.
Yeah, I've got another question from the chat. So what's your advice for new grads that are currently struggling to get their foot in the door? And then I'm also curious to see how you would recommend, I guess, new grads or like people earlier in their careers to leverage AI in their like portfolios, resumes, projects, et cetera.
Yeah, I am woefully unqualified to do the second one because I'm still trying to figure out how to do that in my own work. The first one, though, about people trying to get their foot in the door, I think it's to pick a non-tech company. I think it's to try to find a way in the door through some other industry that is trying to transform, that needs or wants new ideas that you've learned and picked up through the sort of process, because you're closer to school, you're closer to learning, you're closer to potentially just having the time to tinker and hack with things. And so I think figure out how to turn that into an asset and take that to some company that's trying to become more tech-enabled, digitally transformed. Choose your jargon that you like. I cannot answer the second one, though.
Okay.
I guess, sorry, that's very loud. I will play a very small devil's advocate to that as someone who works in a non-tech company
Yeah.
in a tech role. That actually can be a challenge to transition as a newer designer, when you come in and you're hired to be on a small team of designers for a non-tech company. Often there isn't infrastructure, and figuring out how to advocate for design is something that I often find is easier if you have mentors. So what would you say to my devil's advocacy?
I mean, choosing the right manager is integral to any of this, and I think that's a really great point. Like what I described was a little bit of a Pollyannish view of you're going to go in this place and change everything, and that's not really what's going to happen. You're going to go in and you're going to do your best to make some changes, and then you're going to see what works and what doesn't, and then you're probably going to move on at some point. And I think that's the reality. Thank you.
Another question from the chat. What do you think are the disciplines and knowledge we are lacking today? And should we be looking at learning to prepare for the AI era in future roles that will be in demand in the near future?
Yes.
Okay.
I think things like creativity and making and trying things and learning and being adaptable and all those. And then I think there's other more qualified people that could give better advice on that one. There's a question here that I don't know if it's a question that's going to make me look good. Maybe. Okay, we'll see.
Hi, kind of building off that previous question. So
great.
with AI being ever evolving and like every job description's acknowledging that coming soon, and you even mentioned within design history, you're moving different materials through these different chairs. So the responsibility of these industrial designers is to learn the new material. What do you think is the responsibility of designers as far as understanding what's under the hood of these various AI offerings? Like heading towards more programming knowledge, things like that? Is that going to be something you anticipate for the future, or will we continue to stay within the bounds of design specific?
I think to the extent that you can learn enough about the underlying things that are happening so you can ask questions and push people to do different things and expand what they wanted to do or were trying to do, that seems really important. I think being able to write like production code probably is not as important, but being able to sort of understand the capabilities seems really critical. I will say every designer I know who has learned more about code has been happy about it. I think there's a lot of selection bias in the people who are able to actually get to the point where they said they've learned something about code, but they don't usually come back and go like, well, that was useless. I wish I hadn't done that.
You mentioned the boom for new things, new products, new design with AI, and I'm curious about your thoughts from a technical perspective of the sustainability and how that'll be affected. I mean, we hear about like Bitcoin, and the sustainability of that is always a big topic. How do you think AI and this demand for new products will affect sustainability?
I mean, I think that's a huge question. And it reflects the need to think about energy sources, which is far beyond what I can really think about. But if you're thinking about sort of the holistic impact on society, that seems like a really important point to consider.
How can we as designers respond to that?
I think I would keep asking that question. Because the other alternative is to say, I'm not going to use these things. And then somebody else is probably going to build them. Somebody else is going to use them, and they might not ask that question. So I think there's an opportunity to keep asking for things that you feel dissatisfied with in order to bring those to light. And to dig into, this is the energy cost of like digital. This is the cost of all these photos that are being saved on my phone to the cloud somewhere. And I think only someone who's curious can help unearth that and then find that and pull that information forward.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question about the future of hiring. So you surfaced multiple roles that kind of appeared in the last years. So I'm wondering how the hiring will change. How will the criteria to evaluate candidates will change? Do you have an opinion on that, and how do you see it happening?
I think it was Brooke from Adobe yesterday. I think I can say Adobe now. I think Brooke from Adobe, those who know. I think Brooke from Adobe yesterday talked about how curiosity remains integral. And she said that you don't have to be an AI expert, you just need to be curious about learning new things and about, what are the things that are possible and what are the things I might try. And I think that seems like that just won't go away. And so I think methods of demonstrating that seem really important. Things that you've hacked on or put together or prototyped seem like integral pieces. And I think that depends on who that manager is and whether they're looking for like a direct, someone who's designed AI, an AI feature or something. But I think either way, you'll be happy that you've learned a new material to add to the sort of like other skills that you have.
Hi, so I just wanted to say that was a great talk. Thank you for your insights. My question is actually around how you think that design education going forward should shift. So I'm a student of the University of Washington, and I know that there's a lot of people here too who are pursuing their masters or in the field of design education, and I'm curious if you think that the way that we approach teaching design should shift going forward in a way to better teach about AI or tools like that, or if there still should be like more of a preference to teaching like theory and skills, and if that should like preface anything else in terms of technology.
I think I would lean most on my conversations with Janelle, who's at Bentley and more experience doing this and thinking about this. And Janelle Estes, she's having her students write research plans using AI and then not using AI and comparing the two. And that seems like a really integral sort of tactic to use because it gets you both using the tool and comfortable with the tool and then also comfortable with some of the theory of trying to do what John Maeda has called it thinking uphill, which is where you make a thing, you try to make a thing from scratch, and it then reveals new things in the process of making. But it seems like inevitable that it has to be integrated, but I don't know to the extent that theory versus sort of practical applications or anything else like that would be how to weight those things. That was a 50% answer. Okay, I think it's lunch. I'm gonna hang out, and I would love to hear what you all think. You can tell me what your ratings are for my answers. And thanks for listening.